Hello and welcome back to Polytudes. In today's lesson we're going to be taking a look at making our own vertex painting shader, by which I mean it's a shader that will work with a vertex painting system. So obviously we're not doing any coding here, we're not going to build the actual system for painting, but we will make a shader that we can use with one. And you don't have to worry about the actual painting system. There's many free options available now. In fact, there's one that's actually built into Unity now, and we'll cover this once the tutorial starts. But just to give you a quick rundown of what it is we'll be making, there's 4 texture inputs, each being able to control the tiling, which is pretty cool. And there's also a 5th input, which is kind of a bit of a special one that uses the alpha channel. So just to run over this a little sort of quickly, I have a red channel, which paints in this sort of cobblestone texture. Obviously you can swap these textures out to whatever it is you want. I have my green channel, which paints in the grass. Makes sense, green for grass. And I have a blue channel, which paints in the sand. And if you're a bit confused as to where the 4th texture is used, it's actually just nothing. So if we go to black, then this is actually used as the base. You can kind of just paint in a bit of a rock. And the special sort of alpha thing that I was telling you about, if I just disable all of these and enable alpha, and then select a color that has full alpha, and don't worry too much if none of this makes sense right now, we will sort of cover these things in the tutorial. But yeah, essentially, so choose this one, make sure it has full alpha. And what this will do from the shader that we'll make is it will create a kind of wetness. So you can sort of put down some puddles and whatnot, or just sort of darker areas. So this is basically just affecting the smoothness of each texture, and there's also a tint that's sort of applied to the whole thing. So you can kind of tweak that to your heart's extent. And obviously if I choose something with no alpha, we can come in and actually just erase it a bit, or just try to mellow it out a touch. So yeah, that's what it is we'll be building. So if that's something that interests you, then stick around, because we're going to be making it like right now. Okay, so to start off with, here we are in a new scene. It's worth noting I am using the HD render pipeline, although lightweight will work as well. And just before we get started, one of the things that kind of bothered me before, and maybe this is something that everybody else has already worked out, but just like the general lighting by default just seemed to like really suck. And the way that you fix that, if you don't already know, is if you come down to rendering and just enable, well, don't enable, you add in scene settings, and this will give you skybox and sort of bounced light and whatnot. So yeah, that's just a little point number 1. But now onto the actual tutorial, and let's start with let's just get down a regular Unity plane. And what we will need first of all is a plugin that will actually allow us to paint some verts, because a vertex painting shader without anything to actually use to paint on is it's kind of worthless. And there is now one inbuilt into Unity, which you may or may not know. So if you go to Package Manager and go to All, scroll down a bit, and it's Pro Builder. Which I'm guessing Unity have bought now, because the guys that have made this, like they've made some crazy nice stuff. But anyway, so just install that. Shouldn't take too long, and then we'll be good to go with everything. Okay, so once that's installed, you'll be able to find it up in Tools, Pro Builder, and then just open the Pro Builder window. And I prefer to just dock it here. And the reason that we need to do this is because we need to make use of their vertex coloring tools. And if you click the plus, you actually get a choice of the palette of the painter, which we will cover a bit later, possibly. But essentially, we just need access to these tools and to be able to paint stuff. But by default, we can't sort of paint anything unless it's sort of turned into a Pro Builder mesh. And so the way that you do that is just hit this Pro Builderize. And the neat thing about this is you can actually subdivide this now. And so we have even more sort of polygons or vertices to work with. So now we can actually start painting just as soon as we actually build the shader. So let's just go ahead and make that quick, because this is taking too long. So there's my old one. So we'll just create a new folder, call it VPaint tutorial. And so we'll start by creating a shader, and it'll be a PBR graph. We'll just call this VPaint tutorial. Let's just begin real simple. Let's put down some colors just to kind of go over what it is we'll be doing. So let's get a red, let's get a green, and let's get a blue. That'll do. So these are what we're going to use to just kind of make sure the theory of this is understood. And so let's grab ourselves a vertex color node, because we are making a vertex painting shader, so we absolutely need to sort of make use of the vertex color node. And by default, you can't control kind of what comes out of here, because obviously you want red and green and blue. So we need to add in a split node, which is kind of handy, but also I don't know why they don't just include it there. But anyway. So now we have access to RGB and A. So this is basically where everything will sort of fall into place. And you'll kind of do one thing and then just repeat that same thing again and again and again and again, especially later on when you want to do extra maps and stuff. But let's just keep it pretty simple for now. So we have this, which is our vertex color split. So let's get in a loop. And the loop, like the first loop, this is also where you can introduce your base color. And again, this might be a bit confusing now, but it will eventually all make sense. So for this one, we'll stick, I guess, the red into there, and then we'll introduce actually another color. So I'll just paste this. So let's make this one, I don't know, like a, I don't want to make it pink because that will look like Unity's broken. So, oops. So yeah, let's do an orange. So we'll have orange and red. So now this will actually be the base. We could use this as a base texture, which is pretty cool. So we'll put that into there. So this T slot is basically like what mask is used for this, and we're saying we want to use the red channel of vertex colors to display this. And if it doesn't display this, then display the orange. And then you basically just keep sort of following this down. So again, you would do another loop, and the first input of this loop is what you already have. So it's just going to kind of chain itself down. And the second input will be the green, and then we'd use the green vertex color as the mask, because we're saying if it's green, like if we are painting green verts, then make it green. If it's not green, fall back to this. And then this is obviously, if it's not red, fall back to this. So everything kind of stacks on itself. So we'll just finish this up quickly. In fact, let me collapse these. They're a bit gigantic. So we'll copy paste that, get ourselves another loop. And again, just do this into that. And we'll use the blue. And now we can throw this straight into the albedo. There we go. And I apologize if I'm not zoomed in enough. Hopefully you can see everything that's going on. So in theory, this should just work fine. I may have gotten this mixed up, but probably not. So we'll save this, and we'll just close this for now. And then we'll come along, create ourselves a material. And if you right click on the actual shader to make a material, it will automatically propagate it for you. So we'll stick this on here, and it looks like it's worked because immediately we have that orange. And if I just open this again, so this is basically the nothing. So this is what will be like used as a base. So pretty cool. So let's open up the vertex color window. And if you don't like this wireframe, which I also do not like it, you can actually just click off and this will still work. So it's pretty cool. So if we click red, we should, let's increase the size of this a bit. Yep, we can paint in red. If we go green, we can paint in green. And then if we go blue, we can paint in blue. So like immediately, sort of right out of the gate, that's 3 colors that, well, sorry, 4 colors that we can use. And there's also the alpha channel, which we're not using yet, but if you've seen the start of this video, then you know what it is we'll be using it for. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. To be honest, like if you already know how to sort of put in textures and things, then you're kind of on your way. But we'll continue anyway. And what we will do is we'll do a bit of a setup phase, because as you can see, this entire creation is basically just like the same thing again and again and again as it falls down a chain. So it's a bit tedious to make. You know, the results are nice. So I'm just going to speed up the video a bit, and I'm just going to lay down some stuff. I'll make the first two just to show you kind of what it is I kind of have in mind. So I'm going to make a vector 1, and let's just call this like base tiling or master tiling. I don't know, call it base tile. That'll do. Make sure it has a default value of 1, always catches me out. And we'll also create a texture 2D, and we'll call this just base diffuse, or base whatever you want. And essentially what we're going to do is replace these colors with these things. So let's get rid of this orange, and let's just throw these down here. So we have our tile and the texture 2D. So let's get texture, a sample texture 2D, because that's how shader graph works. I should probably already mention, although it's likely way too late since people may have already clicked off, but you can build this in Amplify Shader Editor as well. Essentially, the rule at the moment is if you can build it in Shader Graph, you can build it in any other shader node tool, but the opposite does not always apply. So what you can build in any other shader node tool, you might not be able to build in Shader Graph, just because it's early in development. So anyway, we have this, and we also need to introduce some tiling. So let's get our base tile property, stick that into tiling, and stick that into there, and then stick this one into that. So far so good. So now let's just have a quick test of this. So I'll save that, and I don't want to close this because it takes a while to open for some reason, so I'll just put it there. So let's go back here, get our Vertex window, and let's just paint. Okay, so it's coming out white, obviously. I say obviously, it is obvious to me, but because we don't have an input yet, we need to actually select a texture. I have some textures somewhere. I think I grabbed some from textures.com because I didn't like my own. So yeah, there we go. There's the base in place, and it has tiling, which is, neat. So essentially, let's bring this back. What we will be doing is that exact same procedure, just duplicated a whole bunch of times. So I'm going to grab these, I'm going to copy paste, and I'm going to bring these down. That didn't work so well. Thought normally it would, yeah, it normally selects both. So this is a bit of a mess right now, but we need this amount of these, and then I'm also going to just duplicate these and rename them appropriately. So everything's a giant mess right now, but I'll be back in a second. Okay, so that's all done. I was basically just duplicating the vector 1s and the texture 2Ds, so renaming them accordingly as well, because we're going to need to use them. And so for now, let's kind of try to tidy this up a bit. So we'll start over here with the red, and we already have these, which we need, and so we're going to get rid of the red color because we don't need it anymore. And we will select red tile, because this is our tiling amount, and put that in there. And because these were duplicates, they already come with the default of 1, so pretty handy. And then we need the red diffuse, so there we go, put that in there, and so this now overwrites the red texture. And then clean it up just a smidgen. Because yeah, this stuff does get kind of crazy. I don't think Shader Graph at the moment has a way to sort of get and set nodes, so you can kind of, you know, keep things a bit sort of tidy. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, but yeah. I haven't actually used Shader Graph since I did the old tutorial on the water, so there's probably a fair amount that I'm missing. So yeah, again, let's get rid of the green, and green tile, and then green diffuse. And I imagine this is probably the point in the tutorial where everyone's skipping forward because it's very easy to predict what's happening. Okay, so now the last one, and I'll do you a favor and just speed through this last one because I probably should have sped through it all, but maybe I said something that I need to keep in the video. Oh well, speed through. Okay, so I've just saved that, and let's give this a little test. Let's go grab our material, and let's just propagate it with stuff. So in the red, I'll use my pebbles. In the green, I'll use some grass, and for the blue, some sand. And now in theory, let's disable alpha for now. If I were to come along and paint red, it's a little bit bigger. So yeah, you can see that those are there, but probably need to change the tiling amount. And then green, there's the grass. Everything seems to be working okay. And then blue should be the sand. If it's not the sand, then I've broken everything. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's a really nice texture. This is one that I got from textures.com. Kind of looks like it almost has a normal map already, but I guess it's kind of good, kind of bad. Depends on how you look at it. Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly go through some of this, change some of the tilings to be a little bit more... the grass, I don't know. That's probably okay. So at this point, I'm actually going to drop in a different mesh, one that I had made. So when we finish now with this plane, get rid of it. But obviously you will still be working with the plane unless I provide this mesh, but there really isn't any point in doing that. So let's put our material on here, and again just pro builderize, so this now turns into that, and it probably has enough polygons already, but I'll just subdivide it anyway. So yeah, now let's get ready to color it. And I have noticed something a bit weird actually. Let's just click off that so the wireframe disappears. When dealing with imported meshes, I don't know if you can see already, but the scale of the brush is not the same as the scale of what it will paint. So if I choose the sand, which might be a bit more easier to see. So my brush size is tiny. Well, not tiny, it's but it's small, but it wants to cover this entire area, which is it's a bit weird, so I'd normally have to sort of bring this down. But yeah, anyway. So now we can kind of just start to paint in some stuff, and I'll just be sort of quick with this, just to give you an idea. I'm a big fan of Vertex painting shaders. But yeah, I haven't actually used one in production, which is a bit weird. Came close once, but didn't end up using it in the end. Oh well. So yeah, there's that, and then again I would just use sort of black to revert back to like the rocks. So yeah, pretty quick, pretty simple. We just need to get in that sort of wetness and the tint stuff now. So let's close this down and let's expand this out. Okay, yeah, so the first thing that I'm going to do is introduce another lerp node. This was going to be separate from all of the rest because we're not yet going to plug anything into the albedo channel. We will eventually with the tint, but for now we're just going to focus on smoothness. And let's just tidy this up a little bit. Okay, yeah, so let's just bring this over here just to make it a little easier. I'm going to use the alpha channel as the mask. And then let's just bring this all the way back down here. And let's get ourselves some vector ones. You can choose whether or not you want to make these actual properties, so you can, you know, tweak them later. I'm not going to bother personally. So I'll go with 0.2, which will be essentially what I'm saying is 0.2 will be what everything is anyway. And the other one, which will be a little bit higher, like 0.6, who's texting me. Sorry about that. Very unprofessional of me, but nobody really ever sends me anything, so it's usually quite safe, but oh well. So yeah, we have these two values. What have I done wrong here? Why is that like that? Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Interesting. Yeah, so this will just go straight into smoothness, which is over there. So I noticed that I say a lot in my tutorials. I know I'm working on it. Okay, so that should be that. This will look pretty bad, but we'll see what it does. Basically, just check everything along the way. You may have seen then when I saved the asset, everything kind of changed because it's using the 0.2 value by default. So 0.2 is sort of everything. So if I were to even get that down to say 0, and then save this, and then have a look down here, you see it changed ever so slightly. So I will bring that back up. You know, I'll say 0.1. I'll give it just a teeny tiny bit. Okay, and 0.6 might be a little too low for the wetness, but we will see. So let's open up our vertex colors again. Just minimize this. And this time, because we're only using the alpha channel, so what we're saying is no alpha will be this value and full alpha will be this value. So pretty sort of simple. And the reason I kind of disable the RGB stuff is just it will introduce the other textures as well, which we don't want. We want to apply this to all of them rather than overwriting what's already there. We just want to kind of overlay this effect basically. And you can already see as I kind of hover around here and I select a color that has full alpha. At this point, because I've disabled RGB, I don't need to only pick this black one. I can use any so long as it has full alpha. Like the white will do the same job as the black, because it's not taking the color into account, only the alpha. But I prefer to just sort of work this way just to keep my brain simple. Keep my brain simple? I don't think I have any issue with that. Yeah, so come along here and you can see it kind of gets a bit wet. Let's increase this to maybe 0.75 or something. Okay, so that's a lot shinier. And it's not really convincing as being wet yet. And that's because usually wet things kind of get a bit darker. So what we can do is, let's just close this. We will introduce something else into the chain here. So let's just get this a bit out of the way. And you know what, might as well expand this. I've been working sort of teeny tiny for this whole thing, and that's probably driving people insane. Okay, so following the logic as always, we'll get a loop, and what we'll actually do is we'll say this one goes into there, as you know, this is the sort of the chain of events, because if it isn't this, then it's that, and if it isn't that, then it's this, and if it isn't that, then it's this one, and if it isn't that one, it's this one, you know, that whole chain thing. So that still remains in place. We will make use of the chain. But then what we'll also do is we will grab the, in fact, let me just put this over here. We'll again grab the alpha channel of that vertex color node and bring this down here. So we're saying at the moment, if alpha is nothing, then use everything else as is, so it will use all of this other stuff. And if alpha is full, then we have this sort of empty slot here, which we can decide what to do. So what I'm going to do is insert a multiply, and we're going to multiply the textures that are already there, because we're going to use all of them. We just want them to be a bit darker. So let's just get this out of there. So we're going to multiply this sort of last kink of the chain, or the current last kink of the chain, because it's about to not be the last. We're going to multiply this basically by a color. So this one I will make into a property. So color, and we'll just call this wet tint or something. And then let's give it some color. I wouldn't go full black, but you know, it's up to you. And then let's get this, put that in there. And so now this becomes the other part of our kind of lerp formula. So we're saying that if the alpha, which we're using here, is empty, then it will just use everything else in this chain. Like everything else that we built so far, it will just use that. If the alpha is full, then what it's going to do is it's going to run a multiply over all of those with the color that we specify. And so now this becomes the last link of the chain. So we'll save this, and you can see already that it has definitely worked. In fact, at this point we don't even need this, we can close that. So yeah, we can specify the color. Obviously you don't want it to be completely black. I just prefer to give it like a little bit of a tint. And then yeah, just kind of paint to your heart's extent. So we'll choose one, get rid of all this. So we're painting alpha only, and we've selected this color, which has full alpha. And now we can just, you know, make the whole thing wet, basically, or not. And again, if we were to choose something with no alpha, so this one, because the alpha is at 0, we'll be able to get rid of it. And let me just change that size. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up, I guess. There's nothing else to really go over. Only, I suppose, this sort of coloring thing, if you were at all still confused by that. We're using this Vertex color, and we're splitting everything out into RGB and A. So the alpha is important, and you may have noticed for my colors on the red, the green, and the blue, I didn't need to, but I have just taken the alpha down. And what I usually tend to do anyway is if I only want to paint red, I'll disable the alpha. Again, I think it's kind of optional. In fact, if I were to just test this theory out, because we know if we paint alpha with something that's full alpha, then it will get sort of dark and shiny. But if I were to paint everything, RGB and A, and increase this alpha, I don't think, yeah, so it won't be shiny, which is, you know, interesting. Well, interesting in that if you consider this lerp chain, we're basically using, I forget which one it is. It's one of these top two, which doesn't kind of take into account the lerp with the smoothness and the multiply. That is kind of like, it almost sort of stands on its own, and we're multiplying it through that end lerp. I don't know if I've just made things even worse or even more confusing, but essentially this is kind of the end of the tutorial. I hope it made sense. If it didn't, then, you know, I do apologize for that. We will come back later and work on something you know, a little bit sort of more in depth, like adding sort of normal maps and things like that, because at the moment, and you've probably already noticed, but if I start kind of making little sort of puddles and stuff, because it's just sort of these flat textures on, you know, pretty simple geometry, it's not convincing. The environment, granted, isn't helping, but But yeah, it's sort of not ideal. Normal maps and things will definitely kind of boost this, but that's a lot more involved. So it won't be in this tutorial, but it will be in a tutorial hopefully that I have time to do later on. So yeah, that is it for now. I hope you have learned something, and I hope I haven't just confused the absolute hell out of you. And lastly, before I go, I just want to say thank you for helping me reach 500 subscribers. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I hope I can continue to teach more. So yeah, thank you, and I will see you in the next one.